By May 1940, the German military had achieved in mere weeks what the entire Imperial Army failed to do in 4 years of the First World War. Armored divisions shattered the supposedly impregnable fortresses of Belgium and bypassed the Maginot Line entirely, pushing enemy forces into a full, chaotic retreat. This map shows how Army Group A drove a massive wedge through collapsing French lines. General Guderian and Rommel plunged straight toward the English Channel, backing the bulk of the French and British armies into a tiny pocket at Dunkirk. The situation for the Allies was desperate. Completely outmaneuvered, thousands of soldiers fled toward the beaches while German panzer divisions closed in, poised to annihilate remaining resistance and end the Western War. But on May 24th, with the trap firmly established, German High Command issued one of the most heavily debated orders of the entire conflict. They commanded their advancing armor to come to a complete and total halt. The decision to stop a seemingly unstoppable force on the eve of total triumph baffled observers and continues to spark fierce debate today. To understand how the British Army escaped total destruction, we must examine the mechanical, the massive logistical strain, and political realities that forced these tanks to idle. Decades after the war, surviving German generals frequently blamed the halt entirely on Adolf Hitler, framing it as the foolish meddling of an amateur commander who let a guaranteed victory slip through his fingers. The reality on the ground in late May was far more precarious. The Wehrmacht was actually in grave danger of becoming a victim of its own success. This data visualization of German supply lines reveals how the rapid advance had stretched logistics to the breaking point. The panzer divisions had physically outrun their support, leaving the tanks critically short on fuel and ammunition after weeks of continuous combat. The geography offered no favors either. The heavy armored units were perfectly suited for open roads, but completely mismatched for the muddy Flanders marshes and the dense urban environment immediately surrounding the Dunkirk harbor. The speed of the tanks also created a severe tactical imbalance. The German infantry and artillery were lagging miles behind the armor, leaving the frontline units exhausted and highly vulnerable to a coordinated counterattack if they pushed any further without support. When viewed through a tactical lens, the halt order was a calculated military necessity. The German High Command needed a pause to consolidate their overextended forces, resupply their vehicles, and bring up the infantry for the final push. Hermann Göring saw this pause as a massive political opportunity. He convinced Hitler that his Luftwaffe could simply bomb the trapped Allied forces into submission, securing the final victory from the air without risking a single exhausted tank crew. This flight map illustrates a major operational limit to Göring's promise. The Dunkirk pocket was incredibly far from the nearest German airfields. Dive bombers and fighters like the Messerschmitt Bf 109 had to expend the majority of their fuel just to reach the combat zone, leaving them with virtually no margin for error. The environment then stripped away what little advantage they had. Thick, low-hanging coastal fog and dense cloud cover shrouded the French coastline, crippling visibility and making the bombing runs highly inaccurate. Above the clouds, German pilots found an unexpectedly fierce resistance. They quickly discovered their fighters were outmatched at high altitudes by the British Supermarine Spitfire, forcing them into brutal dogfights that further drained their limited fuel. The Luftwaffe's inability to command the airspace or the weather provided a desperate window of opportunity. Under the cover of fog, the British began deploying a massive, ragtag fleet of naval destroyers and civilian transports to evacuate the beaches. By May 26th, it was obvious the Air Force was failing, and the Allied evacuation was rapidly accelerating. Furious with the situation, German command finally rescinded the halt order, taking the ground forces off the leash. The resumed offensive saw immediate results on the eastern flank.
General Fedor von Bock launched a massive attack that battered the defending forces until Belgian King Leopold III, unwilling to sacrifice thousands more lives, agreed to an unconditional surrender. To the west, Erwin Rommel executed a brilliantly fast maneuver across the canal, cutting off retreating French forces and isolating nearly 35,000 men inside the town of Lille. The jaws of the German trap were violently snapping shut. But the Allies did not go quietly. The remaining French First Army dug deep into the smoking rubble of the shrinking pocket, fighting tenaciously to the last man to hold back the German advance and buy time for the ships in the Channel. The fierce rearguard action proved the high cost of the two-day halt. By giving the Allies 48 hours to establish defensive lines, German troops suffered grievous casualties to take urban sectors they could have likely overrun days earlier with little resistance. On June 4th, German forces finally leveled the final fortifications and captured the Dunkirk harbor, arriving just in time to watch the very last British transport ship steam safely away into the English Channel. Despite the escape of the British forces, the sheer scale of the physical victory secured by the Germans is often understated. Over the course of the battle, they captured at least 100,000 French soldiers as prisoners of war. They also inherited a staggering amount of abandoned Allied war material. Because there was absolutely no room on the civilian transport ships for heavy equipment, military vehicles clogged the beaches and surrounding roads for miles in every direction. Thousands of British trucks, tanks, armored cars, and artillery pieces were left sitting in the sand, many still fully fueled and loaded with ordnance. The Wehrmacht simply repainted them, using stolen British expeditionary gear to supply their own forces in campaigns ranging from the scorching deserts of Africa to the freezing depths of Russia. The German public celebrated the capture of France as a monumental tactical triumph, but inside the Wehrmacht, officers quietly lamented the political meddling that let the British army survive. The battle was won, but the opportunity to end the war entirely had sailed away into the fog.